Thank you. Sorry, I scared you with my late arrival. I was having trouble signing in. My name is Jeff. I'm alcoholic. I have alcoholism. Um, Saturday night, 8 p.m. on an AA meeting. I thought, who's going to be going to that meeting? 7 pages of people, lots of people. And you know what? The interesting thing is, I don't have fear of missing out tonight. I am so happy to be home and sober and sitting in front of my computer, talking about the thing that I guess moves me most in this world. Kind of lost the ability for small talk. You want to talk about recovery? You want to talk about challenges and problems? I'd love to sit down and talk with you about it. But if you want to talk about politics or I don't even know anything else, I'm really not that much interested. I'm very sorry. I've lost that ability. So I have an hour. I'll see what I can do here. I'll tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I'll say that my parents had me at an early age. They were 21 when I was born. They were still in college. That was the 60s, and things were different. I'm actually really amazed. My parents are still together, and my father and mother are wonderful people. And I can't imagine having a kid at 21 or at 30, and being responsible people. My father has really good values. He's a really good man. And at my nadir, at the worst of my disease, I had a moment where I thought, he would be so disappointed. He would be so disappointed. And I was this little guy, and they were still in college, and kind of took me wherever they went. I was one of the gang. I was a pretty much free-spirited little guy. I loved to climb trees. I loved to build forts. I was a dumpster diver. Me and my buddy would dive into dumpsters and like dig through stuff and find magnets and toys and stuff that other people threw away. We loved that. We played army, and I was a skateboarder. I would rush headlong into things, dirt bikes, and I was fearless. I really was as a young kid. I'd go down the steepest hill. We didn't wear helmets when we rode bicycles when I was growing up, or on skateboards. I mean, I must have run into a lot of things with my head, like headlong into things, asphalt, brick walls, and just my father. One of the things I'll say is my dad said to me at one point, if it's not bad enough to go to the hospital, I don't want to hear about it. Because I would do this and I would come in screaming and crying, and it didn't stop me. But I think, something happened. My dad, he was an aerospace engineer. He was designing airplanes and decided he didn't want to do that. And he went back to get his master's degree and his PhD, and he became an academic. And we moved because he would go to different universities to try to, become a tenured professor. And so we moved from central Pennsylvania to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We didn't have any money. We lived in, it was subsidized housing. So projects. It was kind of tough. And that's where I started to have my first kind of experience being the new guy, trying to fit in, making new friends, getting into fights. There was an incident, one of the kids in the neighborhood wanted to fight me, and I was afraid to leave my house for, weeks because I didn't want to fight him. So suddenly fear kind of came into my life. And I'm the kind of person that will take it and 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 take it until I can't take it anymore. And then I explode, and then I stand up for myself. And that's what happened. This kid, Wayne, he terrorized me for a summer. He ruined an entire summer. Fear ruined a summer because I was afraid to fight him. I was afraid to get in trouble. I was afraid I just had a lot of fear around the whole thing. And I remember my father saying to me, you cannot stay inside for the rest of the summer. You need to go outside. And if you have a fight with Wayne, you're going to have a fight with Wayne. And here's how you're going to fight Wayne. And he told me what to do. And I went outside the next day, and someone told Wayne, and Wayne came and looked for me. And we had a fight, and I kicked Wayne's ass. It was one of the greatest things ever, and I learned to confront my fear, but it didn't keep it from coming back, and we moved again. And then I was the new kid again. And then there was the Wayne of that town that wanted to fight me. And then we moved again, and there was the Wayne of that town that wanted to fight me. And it was always ridicule. I was just such this naive. I had my new sneakers and my new backpack on the first day of school everywhere I went, and that was enough for other kids to make fun of me and for me I just slowly started to shrink. I started to withdraw. I started to just feel bad about myself. At those younger ages, when it was like 8, 10, 12, I felt bad about myself. And I developed this self-image, based on what other people would tell me about myself, whether they would say, oh, you're ugly, or you're stupid, or you're clumsy, or you're a coward. That's not the word they used. They referred to me as something else. I'm also a very sensitive person, and I'm an only child. So I didn't have like a support system. I always felt alone. I always felt like no one had my back. I always felt scared that I was going to get ganged up on. And if it wasn't bad enough, the things that the other little boys would say, the things that the little girls would say, I just really did not have a very good self-image. And in this one place we were living, I was quite honestly, I got picked on and bullied every single day. And it was from the time I left my house to the bus stop, at the bus stop, on the bus, in the classroom, at recess, on the bus ride home. And then I had young parents who were basically growing up themselves. And I had kind of my relationship with my mom wasn't great. She could get physical when she was upset with me. So I look back on it now, and I was in this chronic state of fear for many years of my life. And looking back on it now, I can see how some of that thinking, some of the warped thinking was starting to take root. And I also know that when I'm in a chronic state, I've learned this through recovery, but when I'm in a chronic kind of red line state of fear constantly, I lost the ability to regulate my emotions. It's kind of like, post-traumatic stress disorder, the littlest thing, and I would have an extreme response to it. Okay. And I just remember feeling, very alone. I just hated going to school. I hated going to school. And so give you some examples. I'm a smart person. I'm actually really bright. I had to learn that I was, and have that experience to learn that I'm actually extremely smart. But in school, when I got good grades, the other kids would make fun of me for getting the good grades. So to adapt, would get bad grades, so I wouldn't get picked on. There was a kid in school that threw spitballs at me every single day. When I got, it was just like, if it wasn't one guy, it was another guy. And I got to the point, I remember sitting in class one time, and this is an example of alcoholic thinking. And I was with these misfits. No one was like a good friend. And this one kid said to me, so-and-so thinks we hate him. And he laughed, and he's like, we don't hate him, whatever. And my alcoholic brain said, I wonder if they hate me. And then I started to obsess on that. And then I started to feel like they hated me. And then I started to be like, you hate me, don't you? And until the point where they didn't want to be around me. Like if that's not a microcosm of my disease, where my mind tells me something, tells me a lie, I believe it, and then I manifest the lie. I bring it into reality. That is the disease of alcoholism. I am a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that was seventh grade. I remember it vividly, you know? But anyway, I don't tell much of my story about what it was like anymore. I really pretty much stay in the solution. So I apologize for getting bogged down. I will tell you, we moved, junior year, fifth, once again, trying to fit in. And, I look back on it now. I got to be honest with you guys. And I just, everyone was such an asshole. I would not be friends with these people today. I look back on these people whose approval I wanted, and my God, I would like. I look at this and I feel bad for the undeveloped me, who was trying to fit in with a bunch of misfits, and felt bad about myself when all these other people were no better, and in fact, probably not as good as, But there I was feeling the worst. Someone said this the other day, and I loved it. They said, someone asked him how he's doing. He says, not as bad as I think I am. That's me. How you doing? Not as bad as I think I am. I just always thought I was worse, less than, not as good, weaker, not as athletic, not as handsome, not as desirable. That's at the core of my disease. And I nurtured those feelings. And in some strange way, I sought out the people to reinforce that. And so I was just like a little alcoholic in waiting. And I had like these depressive, morose thoughts. I had suicidal ideation in high school, and my friends at the time, like, they'd be just, oh, that's stupid. You're such a, drama. Ugh. I look back, I'm like, yeah, that's one response to something like that. Another is that's not normal for someone to be talking about. It's not normal, you know. And that's when I got exposed to drugs and alcohol in that new high school. We were in New Hampshire at the time, and kids were much more open about their drug use. And I was a late bloomer. I did not drink or drug early. My drinking, I would pretend to drink, again, just trying to fit in. I didn't like alcohol. I would the drinking age at the time was 18 in Vermont. And in New Hampshire, it was 21, but we would drive across the bridge into Vermont. I lived on the border, and we would get our beers, and we would go to someone's house. A lot of the kids' parents were never around, so we would just have these parties, and everyone would drink. I would pretend to drink to fit in. And all I really wanted back then, I just felt like I was every time I got my legs under me, we would move. Every time I started to develop friendships, we would move. And at those years in my life, people started to have girlfriends, and I missed out on that. My friends, we moved from Philadelphia to New Hampshire my junior year. All my buddies started dating, and I had to, I didn't know anybody. And the girls, I wasn't attracted to the New Hampshire girls. And I was just trying to fit in again. And it just was, I just felt like I kept missing out on the good stuff, and that senior year, we all went on spring break together, and someone offered me a little powder that you inhale, a little snort. And when I did that, my world changed. When I did that, something went off in my brain, and I felt like I was cool. And I felt like I was on top of the world. And I really liked that experience. And it was fun. Beer and hard liquor, I wasn't really into. That powder, I really liked. Really liked the way I felt. But I was in high school. I didn't have money. I couldn't, So off I went to college, and I had, things started to change for me in college. I liked getting away, starting over. I joined a fraternity. I met girls. I enjoyed the social atmosphere of college. There was lots of fun and experimentation with different substances and things. I do remember I was pledging a fraternity freshman year, and as part of that process, we needed to get alcohol education. And so I remember sitting in the audience, we were in an auditorium, and they had people come and talk to us about alcohol abuse and alcoholism. And one of the guys was an alcoholic. And he said, I'm looking out at all of you, and he said, there are alcoholics out among you. You may not be one yet, you may not realize it, but you're out there. And I remember thinking to myself, not me. That's not going to be me. I did not like hard liquor. I was not a big drinker. I only went out on weekends, and it was parties. You know, um, there were guys in my fraternity that went out every single night, that would wet their bed, that would have to be carried home. And that was not me. I was nowhere near that yet. So anyway, I kind of developed this relationship with drugs and alcohol that wasn't normal, that where it was physically, where it was, something that was acceptable among my peers. It was something we thought was cool and fun and exciting. And that was something I never outgrew. It was something I did not outgrow. That attitude towards drugs. I had a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun in college. I graduated. I went to New York City. I got my first job. The fun continued. A lot of the people that went to the university I went to were in New York City as well. And it was just a really, I look back on it, there was a lot of good times. But it was the onset, I could see moments where I would stay out too late, or, oversleep for work, but things were slowly progressing. Right. And then I went back to school. I went to graduate school. I went down, I lived in Nashville. I went to Vanderbilt for graduate school. And again, we had, in business school, we had classes 4 days, only 4 days out of the week. So Thursday night, we'd have a keg in the business school, and that's how we started. We called it the Larry Tate Society, because Larry Tate was the guy, I think he was in Bewitched, right? That was Darren's boss, that always had a martini in his hand. And that was the Larry Tate Society. So we would start there, and it was work hard, play harder. And that was a good, fun couple of years. And then I graduated. I went and I got a job in a consulting firm, and I was really, happy with myself. And did not drink during the weeks, only on weekends, and even then, not very often. It was a subtle progression. And then I moved back to New York City. I was in Philadelphia for a few years, and then I moved back to New York City to be with my friends. And whenever I hooked up with my friends in New York City, that white powder was there. That was sort of a recurring theme, and it was around that time. I remember that a buddy of mine and we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and we hung out one night, and I didn't go to bed, and I went right into work the next day. And I remember, and he wasn't working, of course. He doesn't have a job, but I have a job in a consulting firm where you actually have to think. You can't go in and be messed up, right? You're problem solving. It's not easy stuff. It's complicated. And if my head hurt, like, I was just useless. And I remember looking at him, and I said, we're in a cab, and he's going home to go to bed, and I'm going to work, with the bloodshot eyes, like, wasted. And I'm like, I look at him, I go, I don't do this. Like, I was feeling the feelings, like the conflict within, like my true self and the disease. And I'm like, this is not who I am. This is not what I do. Right. And he's like, you'll get through it. You'll be all right. Just like all the scummy friends I used to have, right? That they would go home. It was always, they got to go sleep. I had to go to work, and over time, that disease won out, the pain of that morning and that day at work, what wasn't greater than the fun of the night before, just yet. And it's like dancing with the devil, man. That guy, that one in particular, introduced me to a lot of characters in New York City that, eventually, that buddy of mine wasn't there, but I was. I was with those characters late at night. I was going into work late. I was starting to skip work. I was starting to develop a relationship with my one true love, the one that I was most loyal to, over and above the love of my family, the woman I married, all of my friends. There was one that I would do anything for. And I was willing to sacrifice a lot. And, so this is my mid to late 20s. I met a woman, I fell in love. We decided to get married. Going out was fun. Something we did often. She was not aware of my drug use, but among her friends that she introduced me to, I'm like I'm like a magnet for those types of people. We find one another, we find each other. And within her crowd, I found the others that did the things I did. When I would go on business trips, I could go out and I could find what I needed to find in strange cities. I was in London and I'm at some club, and next thing I know, I'm driving around with some guy from Africa in his car in London scoring drugs. Like, I don't know how I even did it, looking back on it now, right? I mean, I just had this natural ability to find other drug addicts and drug dealers. I wish some of my special abilities were different, right? But so I was with, we're getting married, and that should have been a really great thing, but it was a lot of stress for me. I'm an only child. My parents kind of felt, I don't know. I was in the middle of a lot of stuff. It was very stressful. I did not enjoy the engagement process. I did not enjoy everyone's competing interests, being in the middle of everything, trying to make sure everyone was happy. This is what my mind was telling me. And I felt like my own needs were not being recognized. That's what I felt. I felt like everybody's getting what they want except me. And I just gravitated to the thing that worked for me, my coping mechanism. And a week before I was going to get married, I was sitting on my couch, probably 11 o'clock at night. My fiance was asleep. And I just got this craving, this urge, and I got up. I'm like, I got to go out. I lived in New York City, so I could just walk downstairs. We lived on top of restaurants, and was on 89th Street and 3rd Avenue. And I just walked downstairs and I walked into a bar and I started drinking, and I called a dealer and I met some girl and off we went. And I disappeared for 3 days with this woman, a week before I was going to get married. And after that run was over, right, when the drugs ran out, and I panicked, and I went home, and my apartment was full of all of our friends and family. Everyone was looking for me that weekend. They thought I had died, and I was high. And I had to explain that. How do you explain where you were for 3 days to everyone? And I told some stupid lie that they wanted to believe, so they believed it or not, or I don't know. And I got married the next week. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is a mistake. I do not want to marry this person, and it was around that time. I may have been seeing a therapist at that point. Well, the timing's messed up. It doesn't matter. The drug use, the alcoholism, it continued to progress. months, things happened fast. When I met my wife, we were married within a year. We were pregnant within 3 months. The baby was on the way. I got a new job. I got a new apartment. Like there was a lot going on. One morning, I got out of my shower to go to work, and my parents were in my living room. And my wife, I'd been to a party. My wife was pregnant, and some of her friends saw that I was doing drugs and told her about it. And she called my family, my mom and dad, and they did an intervention. And I felt betrayed. Um, and that they were talking about me behind my back. I was helpless. What can I do? I was embarrassed. And so I agreed to go to treatment. And I went to my first treatment. But the entire time I was there, I was telling everyone, I had my counselor convinced that I didn't have a problem. We did the family program while we were there, and he was like, his guidance to us was, don't create stress for Jeff. I was a masterful liar. And I also thought, I'm not using or drinking every single day. I was more like, I'd go a few weeks without doing anything, and then I would go on a run. And I'd go for a few weeks and I'd go on a run. And when I got out, they put me in this aftercare thing. And the person said, well, you're a periodic and this is what you are and XYZ. And I'm like, I just met her and she's telling me about me. There's no way she knows about me. I was so defiant, and she's like, just because you don't drink every day doesn't mean you're not alcoholic. And I'm like, I am not an alcoholic. I may like drugs, but I'm not an alcoholic. And I stopped going to that aftercare. Then I went to another one, and I felt like the guy's like, you can't watch movies with drug use in it. That's going to trigger you. And I'm like, this guy's nuts. I'm not doing that. Another guy said, take away his ATM card. I didn't like that guy's advice. Right. I was on the road. I was running downhill with this thing, and I would I don't even call it relapsing. I would just continue to do what I was doing. And my wife tolerated it and tolerated it and tolerated it until she didn't. And then she would leave, and then I'd be mad that she left. We had a little baby at that time, my daughter, and we wanted to have another kid. And she said, I'm not going to have another kid with you until you stop this. And I was insulted by that. And I hope I'm making it obvious that that was my disease, and that I was so self-centered and self-absorbed and unaware of the impact I was having on others. I look back on that and I feel a lot of different things. I feel like I feel bad for that. I have compassion for who I was. Today I have compassion for who I was back then, but I was lost and I hated myself. And I would do those things and to just kind of blot the feeling, to numb the feeling, the self-hate that I had. My disease is self-hatred. My disease is, the need for love and approval and acceptance. I mean, at its core, my disease is I am unlovable and undesirable as a human being. I still don't to this day understand why some people like me or my parents love me. That is a problem. Now that is going away as my relationship with God has improved. But that is where I was. I look back at this person that I was, and I'm like, my God, like, feel so bad for the and I get it. I drank and drugs so I wouldn't feel those feelings, but I would behave and create more of those experiences to feel bad about, so that when the drugs and alcohol were off, it was unbearable till I just picked up again to dampen the feeling again. And it was that vicious cycle. It was just so the period in between got shorter and shorter and shorter till I was drinking every day. And then I would fight the urge to call a dealer. And everyone was getting more and more fed up with me and more disappointed. My father would be like, what is wrong with you? You have a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids, a house, a great job. What are you doing? And I would just be like, you don't understand. And every time I screwed up, my wife would call my parents, and there was this, I just felt like a child again. And I felt so betrayed. I was just like, there was no way out. There was no way to fix it. And I remember a buddy of mine saying one time, he's like, "Are you really going to throw this all away for that? Are you really going to do that?" And then I saw a therapist and he's like, "Are you really going to throw this all away? Is this really how you want to get divorced over this? Like, is it, I get that you're not happy, but do you want it to be about your drugs and alcohol use?" Couldn't stop. And it got to a point where I wasn't going into work. I went in one day because I'd be up all night into the next day. And I couldn't get myself cleaned up to get into the office. One day I came in at 2 in the afternoon. And the next day I went in and I got the phone call. And by the way, I was just waiting for this. I would be in the office because I'd be, every time there was a door closed, I thought they were talking about me and that was my final day, right? But in my head, I'm like, well, they'll give me a warning. They'll give me a warning before they fire me. And so that's how I play the game. That's the disease working, right? Like, keep using until you get the warning. And I got that warning. And they said to me, "Jeff, if you come in late one more time, you're gone." And what does a drug addict and an alcoholic do when they get a warning at work? Do they go home and do they reassess their value? Like, do they reassess their lives and get their shit together? No. They open up the bottle, and they call the dealer, and they go into work late the very next day. You know? And I remember calling my father and I said, "I got to get out of here. This place is terrible. I can't be here anymore. I need you to help me." He said, "Jeff, I can't help you. I'm not going to put my reputation on the line for you." He said, "You have one foot out the door and the other on a banana peel." I'll never forget. And I just remember thinking, oh my God. And I begged the guy that I worked with not to fire me. I hate that I hate that the disease did that to me. I hate that it took away my ability to look the world in the eye, to be a man. I was groveling with everyone in my life. You want to pour fuel on the fire of self-hatred? Add groveling. Add having no ability to stand up for yourself. No self-respect, no dignity. That's the disease of alcoholism. And I didn't stop yet. Wasn't enough for me. I got clean and sober for 90 days. What I will say is this: my period of abstinence started to grow. Each one of these things was a stepping stone to my recovery that I'm in today. And it was very painful. Getting that first step was an excruciatingly painful experience for me. I am a fighter. I am a willful human being, and I was not going to let go of the one thing that I loved. And then everyone in my life complaining about me, telling me what a problem I was, and I would look at them and I'm like, well, what about you? What about you? This is the one thing I've got. This armchair with this ashtray, with this mound of powder, and this fifth of doers. Go F yourselves. You're not perfect. This is all I got. I'm tired of you people. And I would pull it together because my wife would leave or I would get in trouble at work. And I'd get some time together, just 90 days, 100 days. And then I'd say, I'm going to drink again. My problem is drugs. It's not alcohol. And everyone would say, okay, that's fine. Because none of us understood the disease of alcoholism. None of us knew. And everyone wanted me to be okay. And they're like, well, just give him his alcohol. But if he doesn't do the other stuff, that we'll accept that deal. Well, there's no such thing in my world. That's not it. I'm going to get to the good stuff now. I continue to do that. My final run was in Easter of 2023. I'd been sober for 90 days or so into March, mid-March. My wife's birthday was early March. We met for dinner. And she would support me by not drinking every time I would go through one of these. But she had a drink in me. She was tired of me. And I looked at her, I'm like, you know, I want to drink. And she's like, so drink. I'm okay if you want to drink. I'm like, really? Yeah. All right. So I got a scotch and a tear ran down her cheek. And I'm like, what? She goes, well, I thought you might just get a beer or something. I'm like, why would I do that? Like, if I'm going to have something, I'm going to have what I want. Well, within weeks, I was doing the other stuff. Easter rolls around. We're supposed to go see her parents in Florida. I don't come home. I go out for drinks after work with people from work. I don't come home. This was routine. I was the guy that disappeared. She went without me. I went on a 4-day run. Eventually, I get myself on a plane to Florida. I land in Florida. I drink a 6-pack of tall boys in the drive from Florida to her parents' house. Hadn't slept in 4 days. By the time I got to the front door, I stopped shaking and I walked in like I was normal. That week, I wasn't allowed to drink because I was in trouble. So my resentment built and built and built because all we did when we were with their parents was go to cocktail parties, and I'm not allowed to drink with all these people I don't want to be around. So when I got back, we'd flown separately. So I land in LaGuardia. I still have drugs in my car from before. And I had this moment where I looked at the bag of drugs and I thought I should throw this out the window. I didn't throw it out the window. And on another 4-day run, my wife left me with the kids. We're not together. That was it. My mom and dad came trying to find me. They couldn't find me. I drove around in my car in Connecticut for 4 days. My phone mail and my phone filled up. Everyone thought I was dead. And I finally came home to my house. I fell asleep or passed out, whatever it is, after 4 days of that. On May 2nd, 2003, my first day sober, I woke up. And my first thought was, oh, now what am I going to do? And I crawled home like a little boy. And I slept for 2 days. And I woke up and my parents said, well, now what are you going to do? She's done with you. She's called us. She doesn't want to talk to you. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm not going back to rehab. That doesn't work. And I got up from the seat, and I may have told this story before, but got up from the chair in my parents' living room, and I started to walk across the living room floor. And something said to me, your kids deserve a father. And we stopped. And I was like, I'm going to take this issue off the table. I'll go to rehab. And I called my therapist, who's an addiction specialist. I said, can you get me a bed? He got me a bed. I said, let's go talk to my boss. I'd already been out for 2 weeks. They didn't know where. Well, I went on vacation for a week, and then I went on a run for a week. And then I had to go in and say, I need 2 weeks. That was just one of the very first hard things I had to do. That was not easy. And then off to rehab I went. My wife wouldn't talk to me. I got out of rehab. I would only go for 2 weeks. I was still, again, very willful. I got out of rehab and I had to go back into the office. Now, I'd already done this once before where I went to rehab. People didn't know where I went, and I had to do that kind of gauntlet of walking down the hallway, feeling like everyone was watching me. And it was a horrible feeling. I quit that previous job really quickly after that. This one I came in, people were like, well, where were you? We're all so worried about you. What's going on? And my phone started ringing and my friends were like, hey, what's going on? Where have you been? Like, I hadn't heard from these people in months. It was like they just wanted to, it was people slowing down at the scene, at the scene of an accident on a highway to see the carnage. It was, and I didn't want to answer my phone. And the anxiety I felt, it felt like I could feel the eyes in my back. I knew everyone was talking about me. I was so sick. I could not sleep. I could not concentrate. I could not eat. I could not sit still. My mind was racing. I'm like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And people would, thank you, Elizabeth. Called my sponsor at the time, and God bless that guy. He's like, just come into the city. I live in Connecticut, so I would go into the city. My day would be, I'd get up at 4 a.m, smoke a ton of cigarettes, be at the Starbucks when it opened at 5 a.m, get a coffee there, go to a different store. I rotated Starbucks like I used to rotate liquor stores. And I'd go into work. I'd kind of muscle it through to 1 or 2 o'clock. I'd leave work early. I could not stay at work for a full day. I'd drive into the city. I'd meet my sponsor, and I'd just be like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? He's, Jeff, strap in. It's all okay. It's going to be a wild ride. You're doing the only thing you can do right now, but you stay sober one day at a time. And we'd go to a meeting, we'd go to fellowship after, I would drive home, I would sleep 3 or 4 hours, and I would do that day after day after day after day. My mind would not shut up. I could not, all I ever wanted was to be in this house that I'm in now. It's the same house I had before. I used to get high all the time. I just wanted her to leave me alone so I could do what I wanted to do. God answered that prayer, except if I did those things, I would never see my children again. I was getting randomly drug tested. I had supervised visitation. Like the hammer came down. I was on probation at work because my behavior, it wasn't that I disappeared for 2 weeks. It was everything I was doing up until that point. I was inconsistent, unreliable, irresponsible. I was not a good worker. In my mind, I'm smarter than them. They should just accept that. They should be grateful that they have a worker like me, and everything came crashing in all at the same time. All my credit cards were overdue. My accounts were frozen. I mean, talk about just a hyper state of hyperventilation constantly. Couldn't it, there was nothing. There was no other shoe to drop. It had dropped. No one trusted me. I had nowhere else to go. There was nowhere. The last house on the block, Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was the only place I felt comfortable. I could go sit in that room, and I could hear other people talk about what they were going through. I would go to this room called Perry Street in Manhattan. It's this little workshop, some tiny room with a little light bulb in the middle. It was, cold outside, and people would be in there, and they'd have meeting after meeting after meeting, or 24 hours a day. And I would sit in meeting after meeting after meeting because I could not bear to go home. I felt so bad. And I heard people talking about how they got HIV, or that they were about to die, or that they just lost their mother, or, it was just, slowly I began to like, okay, I'm just going through a divorce, right? My daughter called at this point. She was 3, and she was just crying. She missed me, and I couldn't do anything about it. She was 100 miles away in a different town with her mother, and I couldn't see her because I had supervised visitation. That was powerlessness. That was powerlessness, you know? And I hated my ex-wife for this. I hated her. I took no responsibility for my behavior early on. And it was ugly, and it was unpleasant. I remember saying to a guy that was in rehab with me, we got out of rehab. His wife came back. He got promoted to partner at Merrill Lynch. He got a new apartment, right? The exact opposite of everything that was happening to me. And I was like, the promises are happening for you, brother. And I remember complaining and bitching. And this guy, Bobby, was taking me around to meetings. And I was talking to him. He said, I don't know, Jeff. You're sober for 30 days now. You got a bunch of new friends. You're getting your life back on track. You're developing a relationship with God. Sounds pretty good to me. And I was like, okay, you know. Around that time, I hadn't seen my daughter in a long time, because obviously I was away. And that first weekend, we had supervised visitation, and we were sitting next to each other. Before I left, there was a guy in rehab with me whose urine sample had gotten mixed up. He was actually sober 20 years, but they thought he had relapsed, and they sent him to the rehab I was at. He was a school bus driver from Baltimore, and this little wiry guy, and I was saying goodbye to him. He was like in AA in general. You connect with people that you might not otherwise meet or connect with, you know. And he's like, Jeff, I don't know what's going to happen for you when you leave here. I don't know if you'll get your family back. I don't know if your wife is going to come back to you. I do know that everything will fall into place as it should, and you will see the world with new eyes when you leave here, if you stay sober. And I thanked him. And I wish I knew who he was. I don't remember, you know. But on that first weekend with my daughter, she sat next to me and she was quiet. And she looked over at me and she goes, Daddy, do you have new eyes? And it was one of those moments. God has worked in, that was one of the more overt communications from my higher power. He has whispered many things to me, but that one was, you're on the right track. I am here. I am real. Your daughter sees it. And it was what I needed. So that first year was kind of tumultuous, up and down, crazy, scary, exciting, new. Remember getting that first year and thinking, my God, thank you, God. And the people in my life were happy. My mom and dad could call and I would answer my phone, and the joy that we had. And I developed, I lived in AA and I visited the world. That was my life. I learned about service, and I wanted the privileges that come with sobriety. I wanted a relationship after 1 year. I wanted service commitments. I wanted to be part of this thing. I did the steps. I learned the big book. I got a new sponsor that was very, just erudite and big book thumper, very sober guy. And I learned the big book through and through, and on I went. And around year 2, I started to feel like things were falling off. I felt like things had kind of were flat. My disease, I didn't realize, was starting to progress and was starting to say, is this all there is? You got sober? Where's the good stuff? Right? You've been through all this. You've been through this hell. Where's your relationship? Where's the money? Where's the stuff? The cash and prizes that everyone talks about. And I started to feel bad. And the answer at that time from everyone was, I needed more service commitments. So I got more service commitments. And that buoyed my spirit a little bit. But it was a temporary thing. It was a temporary thing. And then I got the relationship that I wanted. And I was dissatisfied with the relationship. And then I got the new job that I wanted, and I didn't like the job. And then I started to get promoted, and it wasn't happening fast enough. And then things didn't work out at that job, and I blamed myself. And I was spending more and more time thinking about me, more and more time thinking about what went wrong in my life, all the mistakes I made. That underlying self-hatred came back with a fury. That feeling of being unlovable, undesirable, unsuccessful, weak. Dealt with it constantly. And I just thought, I guess I have depression. I just have depression. And thank you, Kevin. And it would happen. I go through bouts of this depression. I had 10 years of recovery, 12 years of recovery. And I had to leave that job and get a new job and start all over. And I had other relationships that didn't work. And I was contemplating suicide again in recovery. And then I came across a message that talks about how the disease manifests in my mind. That's through a self-talking, fault-finding, never satisfied, opinionated mind, always in a hurry, easily frustrated, can't stand the word no, can't stand to be told what to do. That's my sponsor's tagline. But when he said it, he got my attention, because at 15 years of recovery, I wanted to kill myself and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And he told me that I had untreated alcoholism. And I was able to hear that. I don't think I could have heard that at any other earlier point, because I was going to 2 meetings a day. I knew the big book through and through. I had sponsees, I had a sponsor, I was praying, I was meditating, but I wasn't living the steps. I was not applying it in the day that I was in. I did not have a relationship with a higher power. I prayed to God, but my prayers were petitions, and they went something like this: why aren't you giving me what I want, God? What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? Why did you give it to him? Why does he have what I want? When's aren't I due? Where's mine, God? Like a spoiled child. No appreciation for the things in my life. I needed a shift of perception. I needed a change of consciousness. I needed a spiritual experience. The spiritual experience I had very early on had helped, and I was white knuckling it through sobriety, monkey barring from meeting to meeting. I didn't want to pick up, but I didn't want to feel the pain anymore. And it just got to a point where I bottomed out on, like, I cannot live my life like this anymore, where if something good happens, I'm happy. If something bad happens, I'm not. I was completely out of my emotional. I had no control over my emotional state in that 15 years of recovery. And I had no idea how to do it. And the answer is, I cannot. Only a power greater than myself. I can make myself available. I had to admit complete defeat over my thoughts and my thought life. I had to be able to see that. I had to turn and ask for God's assistance, ask God to be in my life. I had to develop a relationship with God so that I could trust and rely upon him rather than people, places, and things. And when I did this, and when I started to develop a relationship with God, my world changed. And it was uncomfortable and hard at first. My disease got really loud and said, that doesn't work. This is bullshit. You're unlovable. None of this works. Wait till something bad really happens. Then we'll see how good this approach works. And all of that did happen. Stuff that I used to think was bad happened. But I have a power greater than myself, who I talk to. And now I can hear. I intuitively know. I just hear things like, Jeff, don't ram your grocery cart into that woman in front of you because she's moving too slow. Don't do it. Calm down. She deserves to be here too. Jeff, smile before you answer the phone with that person. I know that they annoy you. Be of service. Be of service. My sponsor said to me, I got 1 minute. The thing he said, this is my favorite sponsor story. He said, I was bitching. I'm tired of hearing people say they have a life beyond their wildest dreams in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so sick of that. That's such bullshit. I don't have a life beyond my wildest dreams. And he's like, well, what are your wildest dreams? And I said, $1 billion cash liquid in the bank, women, lots of women, houses everywhere, power. He said, oh, yeah. That's great. I love that too. I want houses. I want all that stuff. He said, what's a life beyond that? What's beyond your wildest dreams? And I'm like, oh, what could be beyond that? He goes, want to know what it'd be for me? I said, yeah. He said, to have none of that and be 100% okay. And it clicked. It clicked. I want to be okay no matter what. That's really what I want. I just want to be okay. My disease doesn't want me to be okay right here, right now. It tries to steal that from me every chance it gets. And if I'm listening to it, it wins. But if I have a God, I'm okay. I'm okay. So that's it. Thank you.